Hey, good afternoon, Tim. How are you? Did you make last night's Zoom? I didn't manage last night. Well, thank God that she's pain free. They gave her basically she's been having some chemotherapy for quite a few months, and she was officially announced as being in remission a week or two ago. Everything was looking rosy, but then about a week and a half ago, she just had a terrible amount of pain in her neck, sort of shoulder, chest kind of area. Didn't know what it was. She's gone into hospital, had a whole battery of tests, MRIs, scans, X-rays, the whole lot, and it looks like possibly that she's got some lesions on some of her vertebrae in her neck. They've given her a course of steroids, and she's now pain-free, thankfully. So hopefully, once the steroids wear off, hopefully the pain won't return, and she'll be okay. She'll be able to come home. We're hoping she comes home tomorrow, all being well. Hey, Horatio, thank you for popping in. Yeah, I spoke to her before. The problem is, it is a yellow stem, but it's unlikely to be naked. What was I saying? Yeah, so she's hi Josh. The difficulty is that the hospital she's in the UCH at the moment, and they just won't allow any visitors because of COVID. And the terrible thing is, my mum. I spoke to her about an hour or so ago, and she said the COVID ward is full again. And that's very worrying, it really is. Bit dusty. I'm currently smoking my the pipe I made recently for myself, and I'm smoking a mixture of Blend 131 and All It Golden Sliced. %of the hospitalized cases. I'm not sure if that's. I mean, it's obviously any percentage is a bad percentage, but I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad percentage. I think in some places it was a lot higher. I think they were talking about 50% or something like that. But I don't know if it ended up being as bad as that or not around the country. But that's what the anecdotal sort of discussion often was about that people who went in had a really poor chance of survival. But I think now the hospitals are managing it a lot better than they did in the beginning when they didn't know anything. Don't know much now, but they know more than they did then. And I think they're learning to help the body cope with it and fight it. Hey Suffolk, how you doing? So, Tim, what was the topic last night? I've definitely been doing more of the classic shapes recently. I tell you, they are a lot harder, a lot harder to try and get to. You know, you visualize a shape, you even draw it on the block, and you try to actually bring it out of the block afterwards. It's not easy. I find it a lot harder, and it's quite a commonly known thing that people who are training, doing apprenticeships on pipe making. I mean, I've heard it said many times. I've read it many times that people who go and apprentice with Tom Eltang, that's what he does. He'll say, right, make me a billiard. You make a billiard, then he'll say, right, make 20 exactly like that. I would struggle with that big time. Obviously, that all comes with experience. So I've been pushing myself recently to do more classically shaped pipes. Yesterday I did this pipe here, and but I just wasn't happy with the shaping, especially around that junction. You can see it's not quite, so I'm probably gonna shape that around and make it more of like a strawberry or an acorn, and that should work. I like the stem shape, that really worked nicely with that shank. Hopefully I'll be able to keep it that way, and it's got a lovely look to that, just that, thin, wide and thin. I like that. The rim is nice, really nice and sort of rounded off at the top. It's got some nice grain. It's got a few pits as well, but I don't know, I've become so taken by the grain. I seem to be able to try and get something out of the grain, even if it's not a classically grained pipe, if that makes any sense. And I find it hard to allow myself to rusticate pipes. But this one has got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's got half a dozen sand pits on it. So I don't know. I don't like these rusticated part. Although I did one recently, that half and half, which really came out awesome actually. But doing this one half and half won't get rid of all the pits, unfortunately. Unless I did a completely wacky design on it. And that's just not me. And I find when I force designs, it just doesn't work in the end, doesn't look right. I've been missing comments, sorry. My other phone had crashed. Guns and knives and laws, okay. Beautiful work. Thank you, Picking and Piping. Yeah, so that's, I've got to do that, depending how time goes today. And then I've got this one here, which I'm working on as well. Again, it's not ideal on the shank, but otherwise a really nice pipe, nice dimensions. It's quite small, lightweight, a little sort of sitting Dublin poker. So there's a few of the things on the bench, but hopefully this one will work out as I want it to. The sitting poker, right? So did you come to any consensus about the knives and guns? I assume you covered about whether it's a good thing or not to have it, and about us not having them here. Mm. I wonder how this country would cope if suddenly it became legal to have guns. Whether gun crime would just skyrocket or not. Yeah, I think you're right. Well, is there no test whatsoever before you can get a license in the US? Is it like getting road tax or something? I'm really not familiar with the laws there. As for a hunting license, but to actually own a gun, to exercise your, is it the Second Amendment right to bear arms? Like I said, I'm not on big on that legislation. So how do you go about getting a license then? Is it just a matter of filling out a form, or do you have to actually qualify for something? Hey downstairs. Shalom, shalom. How are you? That's good to hear. We're just talking about gun licensing. Tim was telling me what the chat was about last night on the Zoom because I didn't make it last night. It's taking shape nicely. It's going to have a very small curve. That's upright, so there's a little bit of a curve. So it's just going to have a very slight bend on it. Tony from Rhode Island, how you doing? Although I can't see it yet, this pipe has got some really nice It's got some cross grain going across there and bird's eye on the side, and then cross grain going along the stomach or the heel. Is there any kind of statistic which tells you that those states that have easier laws to acquire guns have more gun crime, or is there no real rhyme or reason to where gun crime is greater? Which ones have less? The ones that have it easier to get the guns, or the ones that have it harder? Because I could see both being possible. Wow. That's interesting. Why do you think that is? Is there a theory behind that, or does that therefore mean that the other states should make it easier to get a gun, and then perhaps the crime rate would go down? Or the gun crime, anyway. Oh, I see what you mean. So there's less victims because the victims have got guns themselves and will defend themselves, and the criminals know that. So they go to areas where they're not going to come up against similar resistance from other guns. Is that what you mean? Have I understood you right? Yeah, that's true as well. And that there's more knife crime here, but I think the chances of fatality, although they're very high with knives as well, but certainly would be less chance of fatalities with knives and less chance of mass killings. I mean, that's got to be one of the main arguments against, automatic guns. Yeah, that's right. Stab vests has become the norm nowadays. Hey Boris, long time no see. Good for you, Boris. That's what I did this morning while I was working. I had Eric on. Eric Weaver. Pipes and Pottery. I can't remember the full name of his channel, but he's been on live quite a lot recently, and I like chatting with him. Hey, Steph and Skip. Hello. So, what's with your workshop, Steph and Skip? You've been threatening to do one for a while. Have you set one up yet? Hey, Paul. This isn't a workshop. This is half a garage, because half of it is partitioned off, and I have an old folding table here, which is this thing here, and I've just got everything piled up around me. I've got next to me here. Give you a quick tour. Let me see if I can turn this around. So there's my desk. So you've got my tools, got some blocks, got some more blocks down there, and my trusty Roberts radio. So there's my messy desk, drill press, my extractor, bench grinder, bandsaw on this. I picked this up, somebody was dumping it, so I took that. And then we have the lathe, with my tools around the lathe, and that's pretty much it. It's all literally in arm's reach, which is advantageous that it's all close by, but I've got no room to expand. I've got, for instance, ooh, you caught a glimpse, well done. I've got a box there. It's a new disc sander, which I haven't even managed to open. It's a large 10-inch disc sander from Axminster. It's been there for about a week. I still haven't managed to open it because I don't know where I'm putting it yet. I need to somehow establish a spare bit of surface. It's a big thing. It's got a big, large footprint. It's about literally that wide and same depth. It's probably about 1.5 feet by 1.5 feet. I do actually like the fact that it's compact. It just means that I'm a little bit restricted. You know, as you get more experience, you kind of invest in more tools. No, mine's not compact like Ian Walker's. Ian Walker's is compact. Mine is a palace compared to his. He's amazing how he does that. He does it all there. You know, he does the full range. He does silver caps and all that kind of stuff, which all in that little space. What's amazing, when you first think about setting up a workshop, you look at other people online, you check out their workshops, and you see all this beautiful. You check out, for instance, Brian Doran. you look at his, or you look at John Keller recently moved into a beautiful setup. Paul Menard, Jeff Graysick, these kind of people, you look at them and they've got these beautiful, bright, airy, clean and tidy workshops, not a dust particle inside. And you think, well, right, that's what I've got to work towards. And then I look at somebody like Ian Walker, who's literally working in the width of a corridor. The length of it is probably the bit they live in that as well, in that barge. But the length of it, part of the time anyway, they have a home as well. But they I don't know, maybe it's about 10, 15 foot long by about 5 foot wide, 6 foot wide maybe. The width of a barge. Maybe it's slightly more. Well, this is it. This is the back of the garden. I don't have a huge garden. And this is a garage which was here when we moved in. A long time ago, I put a wall up halfway, and the back is all storage. And this was kind of used as a multi-utility room. So I'm thinking I'm thinking of doing is actually laying some concrete outside. There's a space next to the garage, between the garage and the next door neighbour. There's a gap of about maybe 6 or 7 feet. And I'm thinking of laying a concrete slab down there and putting another hut, shed or something out there, either for myself to make it from scratch so it should work for me as a workshop, or to everything that's in here, put it in there as storage and taking the wall out here and actually making this into a larger workshop. I haven't got the money for it now, so it's academic, but at some point that's what I would like to do. Move to the country, oh, that would be amazing. Every year when I go away, you go into these holiday accommodations, beautiful houses, garages, barns, everything, big open spaces, huge gardens. You can only dream of that in London. From Maidenhead, I don't know. I think it's about 50 miles possibly. Well, I'll hire a workspace. Can't afford it. And if I've got a space like this, I'd rather be cramped than have to take on another obligation. That's for sure, at least at this stage anyway. I'm not a believer in expansion for the sake of it. It's got to justify itself, and at the moment I can't. Some people would say is give yourself more capacity by expanding, but I think pipe making is a very solitary thing unless you set up with a bunch of guys making pipes, cranking them out, but for me it's really a solitary thing. And if I can keep compact within a small space, I'm not bothering anybody else, I don't have to rely on anybody else. I had that with photography. When I first went into photography, I considered hiring a guy to help me, because there's a lot of schlepping stuff around, there's a lot of lugging equipment around when you're going on location on weddings or whatever it is you're doing. It's not just a camera, it's not just a camera and a flash. That's a neat idea, Josh. But this thing is sitting on a concrete slab which is about 18 inches thick, so I'm not messing with that. So when I first started, I thought maybe I'll get somebody to give me a hand. And a few times, especially when I had long weddings, or if I had a few in a short space of time and I was getting knackered, would sometimes take somebody for a few hours, and just for the labour, to help me. Didn't have to have any photographic experience. It was purely just to move stuff around, help me set up and that kind of thing. And it was just such a waste of time. Waste of money and waste of time. For the extra effort, doing things the way I want it to be done, it's just so much simpler. Even though it's harder work. So I set myself up with equipment that allowed me to work alone. Lots of radio triggers for the flashes and that kind of thing. It is hard work, but it just seems to work better that way. Moby Boog. Big hammer. Yeah, I'm still doing photos, Paul, just about. Very, very little work going on at the moment, obviously, but I did 2 engagements last week. And I've got a wedding coming up in about 10 days or so. Obviously, a very small affair. Can't have too many people. But still, work is work. I ain't complaining. And that will help pay for a little mini vacation. We were going to go away to the countryside for a couple of weeks. We'd booked it already in January time. And then COVID set in. And the lockdown set in. And I was very unwell with it. Well, not very, but I was unwell with it. So we just didn't know what the future held, so we cancelled the holiday. And instead, we did some decorating. We got a decorator in and we had the whole ground floor decorated, which my wife has been wanting for years. And in the old days, I would have done it myself, but I just don't have the time or energy for it. So we got somebody in, did a reasonable job, and that was that. But still, it's vacation time, so we will hopefully be away for a few days, for a week hopefully. It is important to get away. Change of scenery makes all the difference. Todd, no, I don't think this one's going to be naked because I want to bring the grain out. And there's one sand spot in particular which I want to incorporate in the stain. So it doesn't look like it's going to be a naked pipe. That's a good idea, Steph. The one I use when I'm really trying to avoid the dust is that. And right in the beginning of the lockdown, I actually went out with that, but I felt a bit freaky. Well, not freaky, but it was just a bit overkill. I bought one of the motorized face masks. And but it was just too much of a faff to. Well, I don't know. In a way, it's easier because this one is actually, in order for it to work, you've got to wear it pretty tight on your face, and this bit here is quite uncomfortable. It digs into me. So in terms of comfort, the motorized one is fantastic. So that's my motorized one, it works very, very well. But it gets so dusty on the outside it's again, sometimes it's more hassle than it's worth. So I kind of alternate between the various different masks that I've got. But if somebody asked me whether to invest in one of these, whoops, I would probably say for this type of work to go with one of these. It's got to be a decent mask, but I'll just find one that's comfortable. We're getting close to putting the undercoat on. I spend so much more time sanding than I used to. I used to do it all on the, most of it on the sander. And I used to absolutely hate sanding, but I've gotten used to it, and sometimes I really enjoy it. But it certainly gives me more ability to feel, and to. The problem with the motorized sander is that it cuts into it, and I just don't have as much control. Good night, Suffolk. All the best. Alright, and we're up to 400. 240, 180. I can never find the sandpaper that I'm looking for. 240, 600. 400, there we go. Would I do a trade, a painting, a few pipe bags and backy? Always a possibility. I'm not really in the market for trades, because at the moment, this is keeping a roof over my head, believe it or not. You know, it's a very good supplement to my income. And it's really been a lifesaver for me during COVID. So I'm not really looking for trades, but there's always some pipes which, for whatever reason, stick around. They don't get sold. So I'm more than happy to talk to you. Let's see if you happen to like any of them. So I assume you've got my email address. Let's get in touch. We can have a chat. Hi Luke, no, definitely don't inhale. Although there are people that inhale pipe smoke, but that's not the general idea. There's plenty of nicotine to be had without inhaling, if you're a nicotine fiend. which I'm generally not. I mean, I may have become one without even realizing it or intending to, but it was never about the nicotine for me. Even 30 odd years ago when I smoked cigarettes, it wasn't about the nicotine. But I will say this, I often find myself reaching for a pipe or a cigar when I'm feeling tired and I need energy, if I'm in the middle of a job or something like that. It definitely does perk you up. It makes you a little bit more alert if you're driving and you're tired, that kind of thing. Obviously, it's not a substitute for sleep, but nicotine definitely, it gives you a little bit of a pep. You're all about the flavour, very nice. So do you smoke aromatics rather than classic English blends? One of the things I like to do with my pipes is to make sure that this line here flows very, very nicely. And hopefully we'll achieve that. So I'm now just going to go and buff the pipe, smooth out any little sort of hairline scratches that you can't see, and we'll get ready for an undercoat. So what I do is I'll buff it, which will, as I say, will just get rid of some of the really fine scratches that you can't see. And then what I do is I sand it again with 600, just to reopen the pores of the wood, because when you buff it, it kind of fills it with a little bit of the composite or whatever it is, it just closes it down. So I just sand it again with 600. 600 obviously takes it up one level in terms of smoothness from the 400 that I'm doing now, and it also serves to open it back up, open the grain back up, so that when I put the undercoat on, it absorbs it nicely. This piece of briar I can see is actually quite a dark piece of briar anyway, so it won't need too much in the way of sanding, staining, but I just want the grain to absorb that. So you can already see, I don't know if you can see that, but you can see bird's eye there already, and you can see the straight grain there and the bird's eye there. I'll just wet it actually, and I'll show you. Yeah, it's absorbing it really quickly, you can't see it. Alright, I'm just going to move you over to the lathe. Problem is when you're polishing and you've got a metal band, it makes the brush go black, so I need to change it. So I have one, a mop which I use specifically for that. Otherwise all my mops would be black. Yeah, that's a pipe I made for myself. It's a bit mucky. It's a bit mucky right now, but it's a nice pipe. All right, we're going to go up for the 600. Hey Cliff, how you doing? Yeah, it's quite wide. Very, very comfortable stem. So this 600 will open up the grain. I enjoyed your interview with Chad, Cliff. Very much so. Well, this is the is a cross grain, and back in the day, way before my time, cross grain was the grain to have. Now it's all about bird's eye on a stumble and straight grain going up the pipe. It used to be the opposite. And it's about how you cut the block and obviously which part of the block you use, essentially. But cross grain and bird's eye used to be all the rage. Back in probably the 70s, that kind of era, 60s and 70s. But probably more 70s, 80s, going on to the 80s, it was more of a collectible period. Before that, people didn't really collect, although there were some collectors. There's plenty of documentation of it, but collection for collection's sake, I think, really took off 70s and 80s. Before then, it was just smoking a pipe. Adios, Glyphos Higginsos. Right. Sorry, let's get to some staining. Do I have a number one favourite pipe tobacco? It changes all the time. That's the honest truth. There's a few up there. I haven't done like a top 5 in a long time or something like that. But Orly Golden Sliced has to be up there. And at the moment, Blend 131 got to be up there. And Northwoods, even though I don't smoke it as often as I used to, I had a bowl of it yesterday. Beautiful. It's really got to be one of the best tobaccos of all time. Best Latakia tobaccos. And you know what? Desert Island, if somebody said to me, a case full of Penzance, a case full of Northwoods, nowadays, I think I would plumb for the Northwoods. Honestly, I mean that honestly, in all sincerity. Thank you, Grog. I like anything with Burley. How do you know? You know me so well, Josh. Okie dokie. You do have to give it a bit of a shake because you do sometimes get a bit of the solids, the stained solids inside settling. So you got to give it a bit of a shake, rattle and roll. Just grab one of my pipe cleaners. What kind of stain is it? It's this. This is Feelings leather dye. It's what they used for staining leather. So usually you don't need to flame the first layer because it absorbs almost immediately, and that tells me that the grain is nice and open. And if a pipe speaks to me and makes me want to keep it, I know I'm on the right track. And this one, classic shape. It's kind of a stacked billiard, a little bit taller than usual. Not massively so, but it is taller than usual. So when you flame it like that, it burns all the alcohol out of it and you're just left with a stain, and it dries it off. You can see there, dries it off very quickly, and it helps it absorb. And I apply usually anywhere from 6 to 10 coats, but I do it immediately. I don't sit and wait. I flame it and then go for the next one, as I'm doing now. And essentially what I do is I'll keep coating it until it appears black, almost black. And this isn't even a dark brown, this is a medium brown. And then I'll leave it for a few hours, sometimes overnight. Depends how much depth you want to get to the contrast. If you want it to really go deep, you leave it overnight. But the staining sort of method that I use, and the method that I use for bringing out the grain, I generally don't need to leave it overnight. I need to leave it for a couple of hours, that's all. Sometimes I don't even wait that long. And that's why the average factory pipe won't have a contrast stain, because they haven't got time to sit around waiting for it. They'll just stain, buff and go. And you'll always get some grain popping through. It just won't necessarily be a high contrast. Hey, Izzy. Izzy or isn't he? He certainly is. How you doing, Izzy? Shalom, shalom. I did get your message. I'll let you know once I've posted it and I know how much it is. How do I decide on the color of the stain? Well, it depends on the stem that I'm using to some extent, and it depends on the piece of briar. Sometimes the briars themselves can actually have quite a deep color. Sometimes they can be almost like a light brown, and sometimes they can be almost white. So certain stains, if you've got an almost white block, a contrast stain is going to look great. If you've got a brown block, then you're not going to get such a heavy contrast because the base color is already dark. So when you darken the grain, the difference between the grain and the base color of the briar itself is not that great. So sometimes you might not bother with a contrast, and you might go for a colored stain, or you might even go for rustication if you're not going to see much of the grain. So the way it is now, it looks almost like a dress pipe, really nice and shiny, glossy. Okay, so you can see we're pretty much at black. Do one more coat, and that's it. And we'll leave it, and we'll come back to it later on. And then in the meantime, I'll just carry on fiddling with a couple of other pipes which need some attention, which I showed at the beginning of the video. I'll show it to you in a minute. Alright, so this has got a really nice, thick, rich stain coating on there. Alright, so that's going to go on the peg. Okay, so next up, I don't stain the inside unless somebody asks me specifically for a coating, a bowl coating. Then I'll make up a bowl coating, and I'll do a bowl coating, which I make up with carbon dust. The green pipe by Chris Eldridge. Well, he does lots of green pipes. The most recent one, he was doing one which he said he was going to be giving away on I think on YouTube. But he does a lot of those kind of pipes. It's his thing. Lots of weird and wonderful pipes. Okay, so this pipe here, I made this one yesterday. So overall, worked out really nice. I'm just not happy with this junction here. So what I'm going to be doing is I do stick to more classic colouring. I mean, my style essentially is fairly classic, but with a little bit of flair, a little bit of something, whether it be the stem or whether it would be the shaping or the staining. That's genuine. That's me. All right, so that's essentially what I'm aiming to do, is to cut this area out here and then just sort of contour it there so that all this bit here goes away. This whole sort of shoulder over there, all of that, so that it's a much more shaped shape, and the same on the other side. So if it works out, it might end up looking like an acorn type thing. We'll see how it goes. You're welcome to stay along for the ride, but it will be noisy, so turn your volume down if you want. Right guys, whoever of you are still there, this is where we're at. Looking a lot better. A little bit of an acorn shape there. I'll be carrying this on a little bit later on. But for now, I'm going to wish you all well. Thanks for joining me. And I will catch you later. If you're still around, I might be back on finishing off that one. Finishing off this one, hopefully. And maybe even finishing off this one. So let's see how we go. Thanks everybody. Catch you later.